Hello and welcome to the Motor Racing Passion Podcast, brought to you by Breakthrough Health and Wellness. I'm Luke Blattman, joined by Adam Blattman, Daniel Blattman and Brock Schaefer, and today we're talking about the Nurburgring 24 hours. Brock, you love this race.
Yeah, it's my favourite race of the whole year, so it will be a good episode.
Especially this year.
Yeah, the Nurburgring, 9 hours. Was it 9 hours red flag? Doesn't even matter. Great disappointment.
9 hours racing.
But to be honest, I was asleep most of the red flag, so even if it was a green flag, I wouldn't have known.
And the winner topped it off.
The winner topped it off, the fluoro yellow Manthey 911 car P1, as it should be. It hasn't won for a long time. The yellow car, no, its sister car won a few years back. But I feel like it should be a tradition, the Grello 911 winning. So it's meant to be. It's like Christmas pudding on Christmas Day.
I was going to say, would you prefer a Nurburgring 9 hours with a Manthey Grello winner or a full 24 hours with, a Black Falcon Merc winning?
Definitely Manthey. I don't know, the car just does things to me, and I just can't talk about them on this podcast.
Well, I think that ticked Manthey over to, I think, seven wins. They're one of the most winningest teams, I think.
They're the greatest team of all time, Adam.
Doesn't matter how many they've won. It just...
Can we get a fact check on that?
What did you think of the 2021 race, Daniel?
I was so excited for it. And to Brock's point, I think just the extended and completely legitimate, the fog out and the rain out, obviously kind of took the wind out of the sails. That once it did get going, still enthralled and loved every second of it. But you just kind of felt that, they should have just packed up and come back the next week. Because, the beauty of that race is, the survival of the fittest, and it kind of almost felt like a sprint race in the end.
What about you, Adam?
Yeah, much the same as that. That 9 hours, it was, 9 hours of greatness for what it was there. But, having the full 24 hours of it and the experience of it would have been, pretty good. So, bring on 2022 and hopefully we had a full 24 hours of racing in.
I liked it it was the early laps, wasn't it, where sort of there was like 1/3 of the track that was pouring down rain and the rest of it was dry.
Yeah, those variable conditions, which makes sense over, 150 odd corners, and obviously the rise and fall in the different circuits. You kind of had 2 or 3 different weather systems going across the track, so that's definitely sorts them out. And the speed, throwing the speed differential across those cars too, and you've just got 3 and 4 different things challenging the drivers at different times.
Well, I think that's one of the great things about the race is the variance you get from your front running GT3 cars all the way down to your class cars. It's kind of a race for everyone.
Yeah, everything from Porsches this year right down to a Dacia rolling
James
around
May
at the back.
Will be cheering for that, won't he?
That became mine and Brock's favourite car watching it.
Oh, you jumped ship.
Everyone, what a Dacia is, Luke.
Well, someone referred to it as a POV Renault. someone in our watch party of the race referred to it as that. I can't remember who that.
And a Dacia is what you buy when you can't afford to buy a Renault.
Jeez, if you can't afford to buy a Renault, you're in trouble.
Is that the reason we love the race? What's our favourite bit about the race in general? Is it the spread of cars or the fact you can buy a Dacia and enter it?
I'm going to be a bit biased here, but I think every single element of that race makes it so good. It's the massive grid, like normally well over 150 cars. It's the track, which there's no way cars that are that fast, that have such a speed difference to the slower cars, should be racing on a track in 2021 like that. It's the length, like a 24-hour endurance race. It's the fact that there's no safety cars, only slow zones. So the whole race is a sprint. It's every single thing about it is incredible. And if you could design a race with no sort of, 2021 safety standards that we've come to expect, that is the race you would make. And the fact that it runs every year, it's free to watch on YouTube with like super high quality coverage. Everything about it is amazing. And I seriously cannot fault anything about that race. It's like, it is just the most awesome race of the year for me.
Well, I guess tacking on to the back of that is once the race is done after race week, you can go hire a car or take your own car, pay your money, and do 90% of the track that those people have done as well. So it's the track's on itself because it's accessible for everyone to have a drive around, just not at those speeds.
But you can try and go that fast if you want.
And a lot of people have.
I love it how you almost forget with all the other racing that goes on over the year that when the first time you see a truck driving around mid-race with a car on the back driving to an accident.
100%, Luke. And like medical cars, course cars, and they're sort of covered by local yellow, and they're just going past grabbing fifth gear, jumping over the hill, and there's just 3 medical cars cruising around. It is insane. It's like 1970s regulations with 2021 spec cars.
Takes you back to Bathurst pre-1987.
Yeah, and like the drivers have a lot of respect. I know they're quite strict on the slow zones, and you'll get disqualified if sort of take the piss. And the drivers have a lot of respect for the safety of the workers, and obviously because they have almost no incidents with sort of slower vehicles on track. Man, it's just awesome. Like, you couldn't get away with it anywhere else. And it's just because it's Nurburgring, it's like its own thing. And I've heard the drivers refer to it as that. Like, it's just its own thing. It's got such a culture around it. And, I don't know, just awesome. I wish more racing was like that. And I sort of wish I was born earlier to sort of, back when Formula One and touring cars all sort of shared the same vibes.
Well, the race has got as passionate a following as Bathurst in terms of the fans. Like, people camp trackside and have their own parties and everything all day and all night. And
you hear the stories of drivers out there that they come through, parts of the track out the back, and people have got started bonfires and stuff while they're camping, and there's just a smoke haze across the track, and they pop around a corner and drive through the smoke and come through the other side. So it's that great atmosphere that's created by the people that are there.
I remember a few years ago they were interviewing Jamie Chadwick, and she'd just done her first night stint in the N24. She was driving with Aston Martin in a GT4 car, I think. And they said, "Oh, how was your first stint at the night Nurburgring?" And she goes, "Yeah, like, it was really good, but every lap through, I think it was Hatzenbach, she goes, these fans kept shooting flares at me." So flares shot at me for like my 2-hour stint every lap. She goes, anywhere else, it'd be an immediate safety car and, everyone would lose their minds. And she goes, like, nothing happened. And it's just how it is.
Didn't they say too that with obviously the no fans in the 2020 race, that the drivers commented that they couldn't smell the bonfires, they couldn't smell the barbecues, they couldn't smell like even the strong sense of alcohol, like just when they were driving through the the mountain sections. And I was like, that's incredible to think that they've got that much going on those circuits at the time, but those kind of senses that they notice are missing because there was no crowd.
And they said the track was a lot darker too at night. With no fireworks, no bonfires, like you said. I said there were parts of the track that were just pitch black, which normally are quite well lit. And the other thing, talking about the fans on the warm-up lap, normally they're allowed to jump the initial fence or stand behind and go right down onto the edge of the track and wave as all the cars go through for their warm-up lap, which is super cool, and more series should do that. Yeah. But this year was really strange to see them not do that, and I thought that was quite sad as well.
Can you imagine them doing that at the 1000 or something at Bathurst on the warm-up lap? Letting the fans go across the fence onto the side of the track?
Just do it. They do it for the N24. What's the difference? Everyone needs to listen up a bit and watch that race. That's how we should be going racing.
Oh, I agree. Look, there's a reason. There's a reason we stayed up all night. We got together and watched it. You know, the race. That race for us, it brings out the same sort of feelings we get for Bathurst. And
Definitely. It's like if it's my number one bucket list race to attend. It's my number one bucket list race to compete in if I could. Like it is the pinnacle of motorsport by far. That should be part of the Triple Crown.
well, it's ironic for us that it is a race we can aspire to compete in. Like it's if we got a car, we obviously you've got to do the prerequisite one or two NLS rounds to be able to do it and have the right licenses and that. But it's a race like we could get together and hire a BMW or something over there, or a race spec one, like a racing car. So there'd be people over there who do deals and that, and we could buy drives in cars and actually compete. Whereas say the 1000 these days, you can't do that. Even the 12 hour is starting to get to the point where you can't really do that either.
The cool thing about the Nurburgring is, yes, the 12-hour here, you need a GT3 car or a GT4 car or a Mark car to run under invitation or whatever. If you took a V8 supercar to the N24 and said, I want to race it, they would make a category for you. So you could take a sports sedan over there. You could take whatever you want and say, I want to race it, and they will make a class for you. Now, that is cool.
Yeah, that's why we've seen such good variety in the machinery that's competed in the race over the years.
Well, yeah, you go onto the Darcy of it, you got an Opel Manta Foxtail that's been running there for as far back as I can think, running in there, and that always seems to be there. Four guys getting together and having some fun. So that's a testament to bringing in the different cars and everything.
Do you remember the first time you heard about the race?
First time I heard about the race was when Tony Quinn, or was it Tony Quinn or was it Melrose, started entering in the race. So that might have been early 2000s or around the Bathurst 24 hour. That was it, when Melrose took his Mirages and then he took his Holden V8 and then the Quinns took the Porsche GT3 over there. Yeah, that's when it kind of piqued my interest.
Well, that was around the time, like you mentioned, the Bathurst 24 hour, and in many ways, Ross Palmer sort of had a vision initially that sort of to model the Bathurst 24 hour on the Nurburgring 24 hour a little bit.
Yeah, and you're right, because all the things we spoke about before, from terms of being quite accommodating to cars and different classes, and that accessible nature of it. Very similar between the Bathurst 24 hours and the Nurburgring 24 hours.
When did you first sort of hear about it, Adam?
Yeah, it would have been very similar around the Bathurst 24-hour time. It would have been probably the Outsons when they came out here and ran. Was it 2003? 2000, yeah, with their Porsche there. And
brought a cup car out, yeah.
Yeah, and then David Addison and everything talking about the Outsons and Nurburgring 24 hour, and that probably piqued my interest and started looking at it a bit more around there.
How about you, Brock? When did your love affair first start?
Yeah, I got Gran Turismo 4. So I think that was 2004. So I was 11. And they had this track on it called Nurburgring. And I was like, driving around it as a kid, just going, what the hell is this? And I started looking into it, and then I found out that they raced there. And then that was it.
You were set.
It's the best. And it's just insane. No way it should be happening, and it happens every year. I love it.
Do you remember the first race you remember sort of watching, or?
The coverage was so bad back then. So no, I mean, you just find some highlights or something, but not until the last few years when they started live streaming on YouTube, I was properly able to indulge myself in it.
Yeah, the first sort of instance I remember of seeing the races, I saw in an edition of, I think it was Racing Car News as a kid. There was a picture of a number 67 Eggenberger Texaco Ford Sierra, and I sort of originally, as a kid, I looked at that. I was like, no, they were number 6 or number 7 when they raced at Bathurst. What's this 67 on it? And then reading the article and that came with it, it mentioned a Nurburgring 24 hour and the fact that car had won. So then after that, obviously I had a bit of an awareness that there was a Nurburgring 24 hour. And I remember in sort of the mid 90s you'd hear various mentions of them. I remember when the BMW 320i diesel won the 1998 race. There was talk that that car may have come to the 1998 AMP Bathurst 1000, but it didn't in the end. But obviously, so I was hearing a bit about it then, and then sort of early 2000s. That's when I started seeing sort of a bit more regular coverage of it with the. Do you remember the old show on Fox Sports called Motor World?
Oh yeah,
yeah. It started showing little bits and pieces of sort of maybe the 2000 race and the 2001 race, and by then the race had started featuring GT2 cars. So you had or GDS cars as the ALMS was calling them, but yeah, so you had like your Dodge Vipers and things like that in there. Yep. So that's sort of when I started seeing a lot of footage on it, and then and it just built up from there through the 2000s.
It's kind of like to the average person, they may not know about the Nurburgring 24 hour, but if they come in and watch it once and see the variety, a lot of them can be turned into and follow it just because of the variety there in it. I've found.
Yeah, well, yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess my interest in it, well, I suppose it's a car race, so I suppose that's enough to get us all interested in it. But yeah, definitely the variety is an attraction.
There's just always something happening. There's too many cars for there not to be something to watch. Not an accident. There's always a slow zone. There's always something jammed in the fence. Just mad.
I was going to say, the fact that it's not part of a wider championship, I actually think it helps it. Do you know what I mean? Like, people aren't caught up in championship fights or worrying about all this other stuff, in terms of everyone can just watch the race and enjoy it on its own, 2 feet. There's no confusion. There's no of these other stories. It's just a pure race. Everyone having a go, and actually, I think that's what helps make the event what it is. Almost like Bathurst before it was turned into a championship race.
Yeah, I think it'd definitely lose something if for instance, if they made it a round of the Intercontinental GT Challenge or a blonde pan round or something, or.
Yeah, and I think it ties in well because you have your VLN 4 hours, which are qualifying races or endorsement races for drivers that they've got to do them to get sign off to do the 24 hour, and then that kind of builds it up until the 24 hour on it. So and that it's good that that's separate from it as well.
So you mentioned earlier, Daniel, about Melrose taking the Commodore and the Mirages and that to the race. And there's been a fair few Aussies over the years who've had a go at the race.
Yeah, I think if you look at, obviously going back to Tony Quinn, and he obviously took Grant Denyer and New Zealand Craig Baird and multiple drivers there now to look at Matt Campbell, Warren Love. To name a few. So it's great the number of Australian drivers or New Zealand drivers that are actually migrating towards the race now.
Well, we got Josh Burden, who's a bit of a regular nowadays running there.
Is he with the KSM MG? Nissans and Porsches and things these days?
Porsche this year.
Yeah.
I think even Dylan Thomas, who's a local New South Wales state competitor, him and I think his dad have went across and done it in the VW Fun Cup cars a couple of times as well. Going back to touch on how accessible it is for people to go and jump in a car and go across there.
Well, do you guys remember the hippies Volkswagen?
No, I can't say that was at the top.
From the 1998 Nurburgring 24-hour that Ross Palmer took over.
No.
Yeah, no, he there was actually a bit of controversy around this entry because at that point he bought a brand new Beetle, the then new one. He bought it from America, and it got shipped over to Germany for the race, but Volkswagen didn't want him to race it because at that stage the new Beetle wasn't available in Europe for sale. But but he ran with Damien White, Peter McKay, and Melinda Price in the '98 race, and they had a finish.
Didn't know that at all.
Did it still have the frangipani on the dash?
Not sure about that, but the car did do a VLN race later on as well with Jack Brabham as one of the drivers.
Yeah, right.
And from after that, obviously, we mentioned the Mirages seem to go over for the event every year.
Yeah, there was, I think, it started out with just that first one, and then 2 or 3 went over a couple of years in a row.
They went over for it was a good 5 or 6 years. There's I do actually have a list here of the Australians that raced at the ring in the Mirages, and it's not a bad list. I'll run through them. We had Phil Alexander, Tony Alford, Adam Beachy, David Borg, Stephen Bournes, Shane Brangwyn, Kevin Burton, Leighton Cranbrook, Jack Elsgood, Paul Freestone, Richard Gardner, Clint Harvey, Peter Lemus, Barry Nesbitt, Ron Moller, Brett Neal, Malcolm Neal, Colin Osborne, the former CAMS president, Mark Pillardi, Anthony Robson, Gary Courtley, Mal Rose, obviously, Rob Rubis, Dane Rudolph, Rick Shaw, Alan Shepherd, Paul Stubber and Ray Stubber, Adam Wallace and Gary Young. So that's 30 drivers who all had a go at the ring in Mirages.
That's pretty amazing, and they're all from that mid to mid-tier national level series kind of guys, like either from V8 Utes or Commodore Cup. A couple of those drives that got in there for it that have gone across and to have a run in it, which is, I think, great to see.
Yeah, and all those Mirages, of course, were cars from the 1999 to about 2001, 2002-ish Mirage Cup that raced in Australia.
And then was 2 of them the ones that ran at Bathurst 24-hour as well? Probably.
I'm not sure the history of the individual cars, but yeah, no, they were they were all from the same batch, I'm sure. Anyway.
Yeah.
But obviously from there, Mal Rose was probably one of the high-profile competitors because he took the ex Gary Rogers V8 supercar Commodore over there. And it did that did a few Nurburgring 24 hours, 4 or 5. I think
that'd be something else to, like, as much as GT2, GT3 cars in that time were running around there. To run a supercar around there would have been something else.
Yeah, and after that, I mean, Mal Rose, he was still going in sort of the mid 2010s. His last start was I think 2016 in an Aston Martin. So he was still going over for that.
That's so cool. Like every year to just go and do that.
Yeah. Another V8 supercar that attempted to tackle the event was an ex-DJR Ford Falcon EF. It was crashed in practice for the 2003 event by a driver called Chris Marys, who was a visitor also to the Bathurst 24-hour, but the Falcon didn't end up taking the start of the race. I remember, do you guys remember John Trimble in the Daily Planet Commodore?
Yeah.
From the 90s. I recall he was trying to enter his V8 supercar Commodore in one of the late 90s Nurburgring 24 hours. But he couldn't get access to tyres. I think he originally was going to run them on Bridgestones, but Bridgestones couldn't guarantee they'd be okay over 300 kilometres an hour.
Well, I guess that's a good point. Like down the long final straight in there, they wouldn't be limited by the diff ratio that they have to run at Bathurst back then, so they could have bolted in whatever they wanted. So yeah, that's probably something hasn't been thought about.
Yeah, and I don't think well, as far as I know, yeah, he that sort of ended the plans. They didn't really go much further. But that was a shame. That would have been a then current spec V8 supercar as well.
Was a Mark car gone across to run the Nurburgring 24 hour?
That's a good question, Adam. That's a very good question.
If it hasn't, it should.
Yeah,
Someone should take one. That's what they're built for. They're built for that.
Take
sort
a
of stuff.
Mark II car over there. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm surprised one of them hasn't wound up with a race yet. Like, you think that?
Yeah, well, that's what they were built for, and like they'd be pretty good too. Like, I mean, they'd be reasonably competitive. They'd definitely get a class made for them.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's our calling.
Yeah, that's our way in.
It's up to us to organise it.
If you want to give us a Mark II car, we will race it at the N24.
Yeah.
Happen for you.
We'll be the next Aussies on the entry list.
Yeah, we'll be the next Mal Rose and Josh Burden and Matt Campbell, maybe.
When we're out of lockdown, we can start putting the deal together. All right, well, we'll take a quick break, and we'll be back in a minute. Breakthrough Health and Wellness. The Breakthrough 60-Day Challenge combines a highly effective weight loss program and a high-end personal fitness experience without costly memberships. In a culture of flash workouts and going hard, Breakthrough have taken a more sustainable approach and developed the perfect program that will not only get you fit and healthy, but also help you shed stubborn weight that you thought was never going to budge. Breakthrough will offer new inspiration and goals that will lead to life changes you can easily maintain. Each week, Breakthrough offer interesting muscular endurance, strengthening and functional movement exercises with a training app that will rival any workout you have done at the gym. For more information, visit mybreakthrough.com.au. That's MYBreakthrough and follow Breakthrough on Facebook and Instagram. Welcome back to our podcast on the Nurburgring 24 hour. If we look back through the history of the race, we can see that the event has always yo-yoed between touring cars and GT cars being at the front of the field, and the event has always allowed a mix of both. Starting with the first Nurburgring 24 hour in 1970, the first four editions were dominated by an assortment of BMWs. One of our favourites, Hans Stuck, winning the 1970 event as a 19-year-old alongside Clemens Schickentans in a BMW 2002, through to Niki Lauda winning in 1973 in one of those fantastic-looking BMW 3.0 CSLs. The race wasn't held in 74 or 75 due to the oil crisis, but when it returned in 1976, it was the domain of Porsche, who won the next three events, before Ford won the following four with Escorts and Capris. Klaus Ludwig and Klaus Nieswitz amongst the winning drivers in 1982. So we can see that in the first decade or so of the event, the pattern was set, with GT cars and touring cars as the forefront of the event. The race wasn't held in 1983 owing to the construction of the new GP circuit, but when the race returned in 1984, it was BMW again at the front. By then, the Group A touring car formula was getting stronger around the world, and it was Group A spec touring cars that won the following four events. 3 straight to BMW with the 635 and the 325, and then the Texaco Eggenberger Ford Sierra win for Ludwig, Nieswitz and Steve Soper I mentioned earlier in 1987. 1988 we saw a Porsche back on the top step, before BMW and the famous E30 M3 model winning 4 straight from 89 to 92, with the likes of Rivalia, Piero, Winkelhock, Hahn and Chicotto amongst the winners, all of them names familiar to Australian touring car followers. And then there was also a personal favourite of mine, Mark Duez, who was part of the 1992 winning lineup for his first of what would end up being 4 wins. The rest of the 90s featured a Porsche win in 1993, before BMW recorded another 5 straight wins from 1994 to 1998 with a mix of super touring and some much more production spec E36 model M3s. The late Sabine Reck, who we came to know down here as Sabine Schmidt, was a 2-time winner in 1996 and 1997 in one of the production spec M3s. In 1999 the race was opened up to much more modified GT cars, and into the 2000s they've held sway into the current era where all the outright cars are International GT3 spec. Do we think the current GT3 era is the best the race has seen?
I think it's kind of gone the trends through what are the most predominant sort of category like cars at the time. Like currently worldwide, GT3 is the worldwide formula that's common between the worlds. So and it's for quickest, yeah, you could probably say it's the quickest it's been at the moment. So for that, but yeah, like I said before, I think it kind of mirrors to what is big at the time worldwide.
You definitely have to say it's the most competitive sort of era in terms of race winners, the amount of different race winners we can have going into each event.
Yeah, like you look at just the battles in the last couple of years from the start of the race to the end. Like there's so many different in the top 10 that can be there on their own day. So
yeah, I think it's the best now. Just with the depth of the field is much better than it ever was. So although I do sort of, like watching the older stuff when it was like, much more production based, I think, just having the faster cars and yeah, just higher quality, more cars. And yeah, I think it's better now personally.
Yeah, I'm torn because obviously, to Brock's point, the depth and the quality of the field these days, and you look at the teams that are attached to it through the G is probably the strongest. But I do have a bit of nostalgia when I look back at the, either the NGT era with the Vipers and things like that. That was pretty cool. And then obviously look at some Group A periods, even some, when some Super Tours and things ran. So yeah, I think each era adds something very unique. But yeah, no arguments. I think we'll look back on this era, the era it's still going on, and by all accounts, it's got a number of years ahead of it as potentially a peak period for the event.
It's funny, like we all know that I love my Group A and my touring car endurance racing, but going back and watching, for instance, I watched a lot of the 1987 Nurburgring 24-hour in preparation for this, and yeah, it's a bit thin on front runners back then. For instance, that 87 race, you had you had the Texaco Sierra, you had a couple of Group A BMWs, but then the field sort of, in terms of outright pace cars, sort of fell away a bit. And same went in the early 90s. The 92 race, you had the Bugatti BMW, the Schnitzer BMW. There were a couple of factory Porsches, but once again, beyond there, the field dropped away. And same even into the late 90s, 97, 98. You had sort of super touring sort of spec beamed, a couple of them at the front. And then after then, it just dropped away into production sort of cars. So in terms of different winners and sort of basically flat out racing throughout the whole event, 2010 onwards with GT3 cars, I find it hard to argue that it's not. This is sort of the glory years of the event in many ways. For the sake of an argument, though, I did love the early 2000s when you had sort of a mix. You had your GT Chrysler Vipers and things like that, you had Opel and Audi were entering their DTM cars. So, for instance, our Opel won in 2003 with their Astra, which was the DTM model, obviously suitably adjusted for endurance racing. But you also had the BMW M3, which was it was GT2 spec, but it didn't exactly meet the FIA or the ACO GT rules. That was running, and that won twice in the mid 2000s, then won again in 2010. But I think by then it was a properly homologated GT2 car. I thought the mix in the 2000s was quite interesting and made for good racing, but at times then also we all remember the Alton Porsche, which probably set the pace and probably would have run away with all those races if it was reliable enough.
Yeah, it was always interesting to tune in and see how long it would last.
I just remember wishing the Altons had brought that Porsche to Bathurst.
Yeah.
The heartbreak, because they gave it a fair shake, didn't they? And Palmer considered it to go head to head with the Monaros in 2003, but eventually knocked it on its head, no doubt due to some pressure from Holden, and ended up bringing the Cup car out, which was still good. The sight of the Cup car outbreaking the Monaro in going around the outside into Griffin's Bend was in the rain quite stunning.
With those little pod headlights on the nose.
Yeah,
they were my favourites.
That was a highlight.
Triggered something in me, Daniel. Why did the Monaros never go to the N24?
Yeah, actually, that's a very good question.
Oh, they should have taken them. When Nations Cup wound up, Holden should have assembled a team of cars and taken them over there.
Yeah,
I mean that was an event tailor made for them.
Exactly, and they would have been fast enough to win outright.
Yeah, I mean.
Oh, actually, no, they wouldn't.
I don't think. No, not outright. They would. I mean,
that was the era of 550 Ferraris, wasn't it? That was like, yeah. But still, I wonder why they never went.
It's a great question.
I mean, it probably wouldn't have sold many Monaros, I guess, but they'd probably give you the marketing reasons why they didn't go. But I mean, the way they bombed around Bathurst, I mean, they would have been perfectly suited to the Nurburgring, and they might not have had the pace for the an Alton Porsche, but given that era, 04, 05, I don't see why they couldn't have kept up with the DTM Audis and Astras and that.
Yeah, I mean, just put a Vauxhall badge on the front of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Vauxhall Monaro.
Have we unlocked an idea 15 years too late?
Well, Gary Rogers just rebuilt the spare chassis they had, or spare body shell they had up, that's apparently going up for auction. So there's a brand new one built that can be taken across.
That could work.
We need to find out if it was even considered.
Yeah. Well, if anyone knows something.
Because now I'm living in this alter universe where Holden can get 1-2 and then Nurburgring 24-hour. You know what? In that era, nobody from Germany would have even known what a Holden was.
No, but I mean, I would have. You know what? I would have actually cheered on the Monaros if they'd done that.
Definitely.
I probably would have still called them germs, but that's a good point. Maybe Rogers can take the current refurbed Monaro and have that race against the Glickenhaus in whatever class that runs in.
Yeah, why not? Well, there's a challenge for Gary and Barry.
Well, the Glickenhaus was in SP9.
Yeah,
it is SP9, isn't it?
SP9 or SPX? I think they combined now.
Anyway.
The Monaro wouldn't be fast enough. No way.
Not now.
Yeah, good
probably
it's 20 years old.
I mean, now given the race is so GT3, the outright front end of the field is so GT3 focused these days, it's probably. I mean, it was probably in the mid 2000s. There was a bit more of a, there are a lot more different sort of cars. So I think the Monaro would have stood more of a chance in that era when you had a bit of a collection of cars from different specs coming together. Whether it was ever even thought of or not, but it's a bloody good idea.
If you could enter any car into the N24, what car would you enter? Like if you go in next year.
An Arrow X1 2009 Rotax.
They would make a car.
We're not talking about things you already own.
Yeah.
I've got it. Those 2014 Bathurst 12-hour Fiat Abarth cars.
That is a very N24 car. So.
Oh, and you'd have a ball driving them around.
Well, funny enough, the link to that is Matty Campbell was a factory Fiat driver for that race.
He was, yep.
Apparently those, I mean, this, again, another tangent, but apparently those Fiats are actually pretty serious bit of kit. Yeah, I mean, maybe not like horsepower-wise, but just as an actual car, they were pretty tricked.
Did they keep them as race cars, or did they...
Well, there's one that's running in Prod Sports, New South Wales. I reckon, just thinking off the top of my head, a Group 5 Zac Speed Escort. That would be something pretty cool to have a steer around Nurburgring in.
They would have raced on that track back in the day too, so...
Yeah. We're finding just looking through the previous winners of the race. Back in for 70, 79 and 80, Ford Escorts both won.
Yeah.
In there. So, a bit of history there. But yeah, don't mind. I'm partial to a old Ford Escort.
What about you, Brock?
Oh, probably a Porsche 911 GT3.
Yeah.
Red, or what colour would you have it?
Oh, probably fluoro yellow.
Fluoro yellow.
I'm going to go oddball here. We all know I love my rallying and my Group B rallying. When I was watching the 87 race, looked like there was a few Group B Opel Mantas in the event, and like proper Group B spec as opposed to sort of the more standard model. But they sounded like they were on a special stage when they came past in a rally, and I'd love to drive one of them.
They'll tie in. You can have the old Opel battle then with the Foxtail Manta that runs in the race still now.
Yeah. Little inter-race battle.
Yeah.
If there wasn't enough inter-class battles. It's funny if you have a look through the history of the race. There's not many types of cars that have won the race.
A lot of German cars.
Yeah. Well, they seem to go in patch. Well, BMW is obviously the most successful. As we said earlier, they won the first four. So between 1970 and 98, you had three makes of cars that won the event. Until Chrysler came along in 99.
And the Italians don't have much luck, do they? There's usually like one or two Ferraris. And I'm like, come on, this is the year. And then they qualify well and then do absolutely nothing.
Well, there was one on the front row last year.
Yeah. And
that's what I mean. They qualify well. Yeah.
It was sponsored by that tyre company. Oh, what was it?
Oh, Hankook.
Hankook, and they had the worst wet tyres in the whole field. They went to 40th in the first stint, and you just never saw it again.
We should say that while an Italian manufacturer hasn't won, we have had an Italian team win the race. We had the Bugatti BMW team win in 89 and 92. So that's at least something. Have you got any favourite stories of the event or random things that stick out in your memories of it?
Not really random, but I think there's the photo which you guys touched before about cars doing 150 mile an hour past a tow truck and with a couple of cones and a few things around it, which is pretty crazy. Like that, no matter how many times you see it, that's still startling each year when you see that. That kind of stands out.
Well, I guess the standout was it's not specifically N24, but for VLN when the the Nissan coming up over the crest.
Oh yeah.
Young Maddenborough.
Yeah, that's one that, you know, it's not specific N24, but, you know, a lot of the teams were using that for test beds for the 24-hour to do it, and that's something there, that iconic image of popping over the hill where you got cars all four wheels off the ground. That's that whole section there is pretty stands out.
That's where Manfred Winkelhock in a Formula 2 car coming over there, he did a similar thing, except he didn't go over the fence, but he sort of backflipped and then rolled around and rolled into the catch fencing but stayed inside the bounds of the track, and that crash features on Havoc 4 if anybody's got that to have a look at.
Well, there's so many crazy things that happen at that race that I think stuff that happens in that race you would normally remember it as a highlight, but it's just so thick and fast. They all seem to just become part of the race. They don't stand out. But I do remember, either last year or the year before, this BMW, I don't know if he'd had a crash or his bonnet clips came loose, and he was like barreling back to the pit lane. He couldn't see properly, and he just drove like head on into the pit wall.
Was he all right?
Yeah, like the end of the pit wall. Yeah, it's on YouTube. It's just the same. It's just like one of these only Nurburgring things. The commentators were trying not to laugh and stuff. Definitely go on YouTube, have a look at that. Just go BMW Nurburgring pit wall. I'm sure something will come up. Really cool.
Probably the best story I ever read about this event was in '92, and actually the '92 race was similar in a way to the last couple of Nurburgring 24 hours, in that there was a long red flag period where they because there was a lot of fog around, but before that they had a long run under safety car, and while they're going around, obviously it's a bit boring, but one of our favourites, Jo Winkelhock, was rolling around and he wanted to have a smoke, and he had a friend on one of the marshal posts. So he, on one lap around, he sort of motioned in his friend's direction at the marshal's post, as in, give us a cigarette. So next lap around, the marshal had a cigarette waiting for him on the side of the track. So he sort of slowed up and grabbed it, and then went around and smoked it. And then the next lap came around, the marshal had another one there waiting for him, and then that's how he passed the time during a safety car period.
Some people go to extreme lengths just to have a cigarette on a racetrack back then.
That's why Joe always had the open face helmet. Apparently, he was fined 10,000 Deutschmarks for doing it.
What's a Deutschmark? Is that a sausage or is that money?
But I mean, look, if there's one thing you can say about the event is it's as professional as it is, it's still aimed at the clubby, and you can see that right through. If you watch a race from, well, for instance, when I watched the 1987 race, and when I watched the 2021 race, you can see the essence of the race is still the same.
Yeah, and I think that's what we touched on earlier as well with it, that it's a unique event for itself, and one of the last ones that are on there. So yeah, 100% agree with you there, Luke.
Okay, that's where we'll leave our chat on our love of the Nurburgring 24 hour. Please jump onto our Facebook and Instagram pages to share any memories or comments you have about the race. Thanks to Brock, Adam and Daniel for joining me, and thank you to Breakthrough Health and Wellness for their support, and make sure to visit their Facebook and Instagram page, as well as go to Breakthrough's website, mybreakthrough.com.au. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back soon with another episode.